Excuse me, girls. I need to verify something about your tickets. The voice of Erin Mitchell, a gate agent at LAX Terminal C, cut through the bustle of travelers. Her words were sharp, official, commanding attention. Two 17-year-old black girls looked up from their phones near Gate 42, their faces confused. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, standing up straight. Her tone was polite, her hand lifting their first-class boarding passes for Mitchell to see. Mitchell's eyes narrowed as she examined the tickets. Her brows pulled together, skepticism etched across her face. "These seats? How exactly did you purchase them?" she asked, her tone already casting judgment. "With our credit cards," Zara replied calmly, not flinching. The people around them began to take notice, some glancing over their phones, others pausing mid-step. Mitchell didn't lower her voice. "I'm going to need to see some additional verification. We've had issues with fraudulent bookings lately." The words echoed through the terminal like a slow punch. Maya and Zara exchanged a glance. Around them, passengers were starting to stare. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. "Have you ever been judged so quickly, so completely, that strangers believed your success was a mistake?" Above the gate, the digital clock glowed 6:47 p.m. Boarding for first class was just 8 minutes away. Mitchell stood with her arms crossed, her foot tapping. She looked uncomfortable. It wasn't just about the tickets. Their posture was too confident, their clothes too sharp. Something about these two girls didn't sit right with her. "I need proof of purchase," she repeated louder this time. Passengers shifted, eyes lingering. Whispers danced through the crowd. Zara reached into her blazer, not for her card, not yet, but for her phone. In one smooth motion, she opened Instagram Live. A ping. "Zara Thompson 17 is now live." The viewership started ticking upward. "Here's our confirmation email," Maya said, tilting her screen for Mitchell to see, "and our receipts." Mitchell barely glanced at the evidence. "These could be fake," she snapped. "Corporate policy requires further verification for irregular passengers." "Irregular?" Maya asked, her voice steady, though Zara noticed the tremble in her sister's fingers. "You know what I mean," Mitchell said, her tone dropping with subtle contempt. The girls didn't move. In the inside pockets of their blazers sat matching platinum American Express cards, both under the name R. Thompson. Neither girl reached for them. Brad Chen, the gate supervisor, appeared next. Mitchell had clearly radioed him over. He looked nervous, adjusting his tie compulsively. Shorter than the girls, he peered at them over his laptop screen. "What's going on here?" he asked, though it sounded more like a formality. "They're claiming they have first-class seats." Mitchell jumped in before anyone else could speak. "Obviously, there's been some system error. Probably got upgraded by mistake." A woman nearby leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Probably using their parents' cards without permission." The businessman nodded, muttering something about kids needing to be taught a lesson. Zara's phone buzzed. A call from Dad. Then one from Legal Dept, a third from Board Secretary. She declined all of them. She wasn't ready to escalate yet. The viewer count on her live stream climbed steadily, 247, 356, 451. "Look, girls," Chen said, trying to sound sympathetic, "just take the economy seats. Let's not make a scene. I'm sure your parents will understand." Maya reached into her wallet. She didn't say anything, but tilted it slightly. Inside was a lounge wristband from earlier that day. First class. She had a business card too, but it was unreadable from Mitchell's distance. "We purchased these tickets legally," Zara said, still streaming. "We have every right to board." Mitchell gave a dry chuckle. "Rights. Honey rights are for paying customers. And I seriously doubt you paid for these yourselves." The crowd grew thicker. More phones came out. Some passengers filmed. Others looked away uncomfortable. An elderly black woman stepped forward, her expression gentle and concerned. "Excuse me," she said softly. "If it's about the cost, I'd be happy to help cover an upgrade to economy." Maya gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you, ma'am, but we already have our seats." Mitchell's radio crackled. "Karen, we need to start boarding. What's your status?" "Minor situation," she answered into the radio. "Requesting supervisor assistance." The businessman from earlier stepped up to Chen. "Some of us have connecting flights. Can't you just remove them?" "We're working on it," Sir Chen replied. On Zara's live stream, the viewer count hit 1,247. Comments were now scrolling faster than she could read. "This is disgusting. It's 2025, and we're still doing this. Where are their parents? Probably fake tickets anyway." Their suitcases sat off to the side, clearly tagged with priority, diamond status. It was an elite level one that required serious cash or serious loyalty. "I'm calling security," Mitchell snapped, grabbing her radio again. "Is that really necessary?" asked a flight attendant named Jessica Reyes, walking over from the jet bridge. "They seem like nice girls." "Nice girls don't scam their way into first class," Mitchell retorted. Maya's phone buzzed again. "Dad, emergency line." She looked at Zara. Zara gave a subtle nod. Maya declined the call. "We can handle this ourselves," she whispered. The clock read 6:54 p.m., 4 minutes to boarding. Chen typed furiously on his laptop. "No red flags in the system," he muttered. "The tickets appear legitimate." "Appear," Mitchell repeated. "But come on, look at them. They can't possibly afford this." "We are looking at them," said a new voice from the back of the crowd. Sarah Kim had arrived, a local news blogger with a camera already recording. "And we're recording everything," she added. The viewer count jumped again, 1,847. The hashtag #GirlsAtGate42 started trending. Mitchell's confidence faltered. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered. She dialed on her phone. "Jennifer, it's Karen at Gate 42. I need you to handle a situation. 2 girls are refusing to accept their proper seat assignments. They're claiming first class, but..." "Yes, I'll hold." Maya and Zara didn't flinch. They didn't need to. Their father had prepared them for moments like this, when silence spoke louder than shouting and proof was stronger than protest. And this wasn't just about 2 girls anymore. This was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. The digital clock flicked to 6:55 p.m. 3 minutes until first-class boarding was scheduled to begin. On Brad Chen's iPad screen, Jennifer Walsh, district supervisor, appeared via emergency video call. Her hair was pulled back tight, her tone clipped and businesslike, clearly irritated to be bothered at this hour. "What's the situation, Brad?" she asked, voice cracking slightly through the tinny tablet speakers. 2 passengers claiming first-class seats, Chen replied, angling the device toward Maya and Zara. "Karen here has concerns about ticket authenticity." Walsh studied the twins through the screen, her eyes narrowing. "Have you verified their identification?" "They're minors," Mitchell interjected, leaning into the camera's view. "Probably using stolen cards or fake IDs. I've seen this kind of thing before." Zara's livestream viewer count was now pushing past 12,000. The comments flew by too fast to track. "Minors can't fly first class alone. Since when racial profiling? Plain and simple. They're handling this like pros. Way better than I would." The girls stood, motionless, shoulders squared. Their expressions were calm, too calm. But inside, Maya could feel the heat climbing to her neck. Every whisper from the crowd, every second ticking by, felt like a slow-motion judgment. "Minors can't purchase first-class tickets without adult authorization," Walsh finally declared. "Remove them from the boarding area." A hushed murmur rippled through the terminal. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others looked visibly uncomfortable. The elderly black woman who had offered help earlier shook her head slowly, visibly pained. This wasn't unfamiliar territory. It was just more public this time. "Ma'am," Maya said gently, addressing the iPad screen. "Directly, we have valid identification, confirmed payment, and proper seat assignments. We're simply requesting to speak with someone who can verify our travel arrangements." Walsh's jaw tensed. "Young lady, I don't appreciate your attitude. Security will escort you to the terminal. You can resolve your ticket issues with customer service." The crowd had stopped whispering. Now they were filming. Now they were angry. Sarah Kim stepped in closer, pointing her camera straight at the screen. "For the record," she asked, "what specific airline policy allows you to remove ticketed passengers without cause?" "This is a private airline matter," Walsh snapped. "Turn off that camera." "Public terminal," Kim replied steadily. "Public right to record." At 6:56 p.m., 2 uniformed security officers arrived, their faces unreadable. One was tall and stocky. His name tag read Rodriguez. The other, leaner, went by Thompson. Rodriguez approached first. "Ladies, we need you to come with us," he said, voice low but firm. "We can sort this out downstairs." "Sort what out?" Zara asked, still holding her phone steady. "We haven't done anything wrong." "You're disrupting the boarding process," Officer Thompson replied. "That's grounds for removal." "We're not disrupting anything," Maya said clearly, her voice louder now. "We're standing here, with our tickets." Phones popped up from all directions. The crowd shifted forward slightly, drawn by the scent of injustice. The hashtag Girls at Gate 42 now had over 50,000 mentions. A man in a pressed suit pushed toward the front. "Officers, these girls have held up the entire flight. Some of us have important meetings." "Sir, please step back," Rodriguez said, placing himself between the man and the girls. "We're handling it." Flight attendant Jessica Reyes reappeared at the gate podium. "Excuse me, but first-class boarding should begin now. Should I start?" Walsh's voice crackled through the iPad again. "Absolutely not. Clear this situation first." The girls looked at each other. Zara's hand brushed against Maya's blazer, 3 taps their silent signal. Maya gave the faintest nod. 10 seconds. That's what they were giving everyone. 10 seconds to do the right thing. 10 seconds to see if anyone at all would speak up. The officers took a step forward. Mitchell's smirk returned triumphant. Chen adjusted his tie with trembling fingers. Walsh stared into the screen, eyes locked on the girls, like they were misbehaving children. And then, officers said a calm, elderly voice. It was the same black woman from earlier. She stepped forward again, her chin lifted with quiet strength. "I've been here the whole time. These young ladies have done absolutely nothing wrong. They've answered every question, stayed respectful, and stood still while everyone else around them caused chaos." "Ma'am, please don't interfere," Thompson said. "I'm not interfering," she replied. "I'm witnessing." A few feet away, a young Latina woman with 2 small children raised her voice. "My daughter is watching this live stream," she said. "What am I supposed to tell her about fairness?" "This isn't about fairness," Mitchell snapped. "This is about protocol." "What protocol?" asked a tall black businessman who'd been quiet until now. "I fly first class every week. No one's ever asked me to prove I could afford it." "That's different," Mitchell replied instinctively. How he pressed. Mitchell froze. Her face flushed crimson. She looked to Chen for backup, but he was staring at the floor. No help was coming. The digital clock ticked 6:57 p.m. Boarding should have started 2 minutes ago. "That's it," Walsh said from the iPad. "Officers remove them. If they won't comply with airline policy, they forfeit their right to fly." Rodriguez didn't move. "Ma'am, they have valid tickets. Removing paying passengers without cause could be complicated." "I'll take responsibility," Walsh snapped. "Remove them now." The security team inched closer. Zara glanced at Maya. "Should we call him?" she whispered. Maya scanned the crowd. Phones, still raised a blogger, filming passengers watching in tense silence. 47,000 people were now watching the live stream. She looked back at her sister and shook her head gently. Not yet. Let's see how far they'll push it. Rodriguez reached toward Maya's arm. Excuse me, Maya said, calmly stepping back. She unbuttoned her blazer. Pinned neatly to her shirt was a slim plastic badge. Rodriguez's eyes dropped to it. The text was small, but he could read it. M. Thompson. Board Observer, Thompson Holdings. His hand froze midair. Zara followed suit, revealing her own badge. Z. Thompson. Board Observer, Thompson Holdings. Rodriguez took a step back, blinking. Thompson Holdings. He repeated, unsure of what he was even saying. A ripple passed through the crowd. Phones snapped upward again. Passengers began typing furiously. Thompson Holdings, someone whispered. Aerospace Defense. Search results started showing up on screens. Thompson Holdings, $12.7 billion revenue. Major aerospace contractor. Parent company of Melton Aerospace. Funded LAX Terminal C renovation project. The energy shifted like a thunderclap. Mitchell's confident smirk vanished. Chen's mouth dropped open. Walsh leaned closer to the iPad screen, squinting. That can't be right. Without a word, Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact simply labeled legal. She tapped dial. The phone rang once. Thompson Holdings Legal Department. This is Catherine Mitchell. Catherine, this is Maya Thompson. Authentication code, Delta 77, Charlie. We have a discrimination incident at LAX Gate 42. Full documentation package required. Understood, Miss Thompson. Are you and your sister safe? For now. Live stream is running. Viewer count is at 50,000 and rising. I'll notify your father immediately. Legal team is en route. Maya ended the call and looked back at the stunned crowd. 10 seconds were up. The air around Gate 42 seemed to freeze. Phones were held high. Mouths hung open. Even those who had doubted the girls were now glued to their screens, rereading the search results. Maya and Zara Thompson. Board observers. Thompson Holdings. Karen Mitchell's face had gone pale, her lips moving, but forming no sound. Brad Chen stared at his laptop screen, where a quick Google search now confirmed the unthinkable. Thompson Holdings, primary investor in LAX Terminal C redevelopment. Annual revenue, $12.7 billion, major aerospace defense contractor. CEO Robert Thompson widower. Adopted twin daughters. The same twin daughters now standing silently in front of them. Officer Rodriguez stepped further away from Maya, his hand slowly lowering from his radio. Ma'am, he said cautiously to Mitchell, I think we need to reassess this situation. From the iPad screen, Jennifer Walsh's voice cut through the tension like a blade. What's happening? I can't see clearly on this screen. Brad cleared his throat. Jennifer, the girls, they work for Thompson Holdings. What? Walsh barked. That's impossible. They're children. Maya calmly lifted her phone again, scrolling to another contact labeled Dad Emergency Line. She held it up, not dialing yet, but letting the camera and the crowd see it clearly. Would you like me to call him? She asked, addressing the screen. The live stream viewer count surged past 98,000. The hashtags now flooding the internet have girls at Gate 42, Thompson twins, LAX discrimination, Daddy owns the airport. Sarah Kim, still recording, stepped closer with purpose. For our viewers just joining, she said into her microphone, we're witnessing what appears to be a case of racial profiling and discrimination at LAX, where two black teenage girls were nearly removed from first class until they revealed they work for the corporation that built half this terminal. A businessman in the crowd opened his own phone camera. I need to document this for my company's diversity training, he muttered. The elderly black woman, who had tried to help earlier, stepped up once more, her voice gentle but full of emotion. Sweethearts, I'm so sorry you had to go through this, she said, but I'm proud of how you handled it. Thank you, Zara replied, still live. We learned from the best. Mitchell, shaken, tried to recover. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. If you really work for that company, of course you can board. Maya raised an eyebrow. That company, she repeated. You mean Thompson Holdings, the aerospace contractor that holds $847 million in annual contracts with your airline? Chen was now frantically typing. Ma'am, he muttered to Walsh, I'm pulling up contract details. I'm seeing it now. Thompson Holdings has a comprehensive vendor agreement, and there's a clause. What does it say? Maya asked. Chen hesitated. Section 12.3. It requires non-discriminatory service to all Thompson family members and employees. Walsh finally relented. That's enough. Let them board immediately. This incident is over. Zara's eyes didn't flinch. Actually, she said evenly, this incident is just beginning. She slowly turned her phone toward the iPad camera so the live stream could capture Jennifer Walsh's face directly. Miss Walsh, she said, her voice clear and calm. You just ordered security to remove 2 paying passengers from the terminal without cause. You did so while nearly 100,000 people watched live and while dozens more recorded every moment. On what grounds did you make that decision? I was following protocol. Walsh answered, visibly uncomfortable. What protocol allows you to remove passengers based on their age, race, or appearance? Maya asked, stepping in. Walsh stammered, We have policies. About verifications. Please be specific, Zara said. Silence. Walsh's office phone rang in the background, shrill and insistent. She didn't answer. Mitchell took a breath, her voice breaking slightly. Girls, I think we all got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we just get you boarded and forget this ever happened? Maya looked around at the crowd of recording passengers, at the security officers still standing awkwardly nearby, at the bloggers and cameras and glowing phones. Forget, she repeated softly. I don't think forgetting is an option anymore. Suddenly, another voice rang out from the side of the gate. Excuse me, is there a problem here? Heads turned to see a woman in a crisp pilot uniform approaching. Her name tag read, Captain Rebecca Santos. She looked to be in her early 40s, with the confident calm of someone who'd seen her share of chaos. Captain Santos, Chen said quickly. We're just finishing up a minor boarding issue. Santos paused, taking in the scene crowd camera's tension. This doesn't look minor, she said plainly. What's the issue? These passengers' tickets needed verification, Mitchell said quickly. Just a misunderstanding. Santos approached the girls directly. May I see your boarding passes? She asked. Maya and Zara handed them over without a word. Santos examined the passes, flipping them over, cross-checking the information against her manifest. Seats 1A and 1B, she said. Maya and Zara Thompson. She looked up. Is there a problem with these seats? No problem at all, Chen said quickly. We were just clarifying. Santos looked at Mitchell, then back at the girls, then around at the still filming crowd. And what exactly needed clarifying, she asked slowly. No one answered, because everyone knew the answer. They had judged them on sight. Maya's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and smiled. Captain Santos, she said gently. I believe my father is trying to reach you. Santos blinked. Your father, Robert Thompson, Zara said calmly. He's been waiting to taxi for the past 15 minutes. Captain Santos's face changed instantly. Robert Thompson, the CEO. Maya nodded. He's in the cockpit of the aircraft behind yours. Santos turned to the window overlooking the tarmac. Parked just beyond the commercial gate was a sleek black and silver corporate jet. The Thompson Holdings logo gleamed along the side. Through the cockpit window, a man in pilot uniform was clearly visible, speaking into a headset. Oh my God, Santos murmured. That's Robert Thompson. He's been waiting for clearance for 15 minutes. The crowd now pressed against the window to see. Brad Chen's laptop chimed with a new message. He read it aloud instinctively. Priority passenger coordination request from Thompson Holdings Aircraft. Requesting immediate boarding clearance for passengers Maya and Zara, Thompson seats 1A and 1B. A low rumble followed the engines of the corporate jet coming alive with a subtle but unmistakable growl. "He's been waiting for us," Maya said quietly. "He doesn't like to be kept waiting," Zara added. Mitchell looked like she might collapse. I didn't know. Didn't know what Zara asked. That 2 black teenagers could afford first class. That young people might work for major corporations. That appearances aren't a valid basis for suspicion. The livestream viewer count hit 127,000. The incident was no longer local. This was national. And through the window, the Thompson Holdings jet kept humming patient, poised, and powerful. Inside the terminal, the silence was deafening. The tension at Gate 42 was no longer just a moment, it had become a symbol. Maya stood tall, phone in hand, finger hovering over one contact. "Should I call him now?" she asked, her voice low but clear. The crowd was frozen, watching her every move. Then she tapped the screen. The phone rang once, twice. Connected. A voice came through the speaker, deep composed and unmistakably authoritative. "Maya, sweetheart. What's going on?" "I've been holding position for 12 minutes. It was Robert Thompson. His voice echoed across the terminal like thunder held back by silk. People instinctively leaned in as if hearing a general address his troops. "Hi, Dad." Maya replied, her tone calm but unmistakably firm. "We're having a bit of a situation here at Gate 42. Some confusion about our tickets." There was a pause. Confusion. His voice dropped half an octave. "What kind of confusion?" Captain Santos stepped forward quickly, sensing the need to intercept what was about to become a very public storm. "Mr. Thompson, this is Captain Rebecca Santos. I apologize for the delay. We're in the process of resolving a minor administrative issue. I've been monitoring tower communications," Robert said evenly. "My daughters were supposed to board 15 minutes ago. Why haven't they?" The entire terminal seemed to lean closer. Jennifer Walsh's face was still visible on the iPad screen. She looked like a woman trying to stop a train by blinking. "Mr. Thompson?" She cut in, her voice wavering. "This is Jennifer Walsh, District Supervisor. There was a misunderstanding during ticket verification procedures." "Ticket verification?" Robert interrupted, voice now edged in ice. "Captain Santos, are you telling me my daughter's first-class tickets required extra verification?" Santos looked cornered. "Sir, I wasn't involved in the original discussion. Dad, Zara cut in. They said our tickets were probably fake. They called security to have us removed." The line went quiet, dead quiet. The kind of quiet that carries weight. From behind the terminal glass, the engines on Robert Thompson's jet pulsed, shifting slightly as if echoing his mood. "They called." Security, Robert repeated each word as sharp as a blade on my daughters. "For having first-class tickets." Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat, trying to explain. "Sir, we were just responding to a report. We never actually." "What's your name, officer?" "Rodriguez, sir. Terminal security." "I want to personally acknowledge your professionalism," Robert said. "You'll be hearing from our security coordinator about additional training opportunities. You did not escalate the situation. That's noted." Rodriguez blinked, unsure whether he was being praised or prepped for litigation. Now Robert's voice deepened. "I want to speak with whoever decided to call security on my daughters." All eyes turned to Mitchell. Maya pointed. "That would be Karen Mitchell, gate agent, and Jennifer Walsh, district supervisor." "Mitchell, Walsh?" Robert paused. "You're both still on the line?" "Yes, sir," they mumbled in unison. "Excellent. I'm going to share some facts." "Maya, how many people are currently watching your live stream?" 167,000, Dad, Maya replied. "Good. That gives me 167,000 witnesses." His tone shifted. Now it was full boardroom mode, decisive, surgical, unflinching. Thomson Holdings maintains $847 million in annual contracts with your airline. We've held those contracts for 7 years. Section 12.3 of our vendor agreement requires non-discriminatory service to all Thomson family members and employees. He let that sit. Additionally, he continued, Thomson Holdings provided $127 million in direct funding for the Terminal C renovations, the very gate you're standing in. Chen was typing frantically, now pulling up contracts and internal memos like a man trying to plug holes in a sinking ship. Our aerospace division handles maintenance for 34% of this airline's domestic fleet. Robert continued. Our insurance subsidiary underwrites $2.3 billion in airline liability coverage. Our logistics division coordinates 12% of your national cargo flow. Each fact hit harder than the last. Every number was a warning shot. Mr. Thompson Walsh said, her voice a threadbare attempt at diplomacy. I want to assure you, this was an isolated incident. Isolated. Robert cut her off. My daughters are 17. They've flown first class since they were 10. Never questioned, never challenged, never once asked to prove they belonged in those seats. He paused. So I'll tell you what changed, he said. Today they flew alone. Today they didn't have their white father standing next to them to validate their presence. Gasps echoed through the terminal, a beat of raw, exposed silence. Mitchell opened her mouth to speak, but Maya beat her to it. You never said the word race, Maya said, meeting her gaze, but everything you did said it for you. You called us irregular. You questioned our cards. You called us troublemakers, entitled. All before you asked a single thing about our travel plans. Sarah Kim edged forward, microphone raised. Mr. Thompson. She said, what action do you plan to take regarding this incident? Robert didn't miss a beat. Excellent question, Ms. Kim. First, I want a written apology from Ms. Mitchell and Ms. Walsh within 24 hours. Not some PR release, real apologies addressed to my daughters. Of course, Walsh said quickly. Second, I want mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff at LAX within 60 days. Role-playing, case studies, outcome evaluations, not just a 45-minute slideshow. That's Walsh started. Expensive Robert finished for her. We spent $847 million with your airline last year. The training is a rounding error. Santos nodded slightly in agreement. Third, he continued, I want the implementation of a passenger dignity protocol. No one will be questioned about affording their ticket based on age, appearance, or assumed socioeconomic status. Mitchell was frozen, barely breathing. And fourth, Robert said, I want quarterly audits. Real ones. Third-party reviews of passenger treatment with a focus on youth and passengers of color. Public reporting included. The list was thorough, specific, and absolutely non-negotiable. And lastly, his voice softened slightly. I want my daughters to know that their dignity is worth more than any contract, any partnership, any dollar amount. He paused. Maya, Zara, are you ready to come home? Actually, Dad, Maya said we'd still like to take this flight. We've been looking forward to this trip, Zara added. You're sure? He asked. We can send the jet. We're sure, they replied in unison. We paid for these seats, Maya said. We'd like to use them. Then you'll use them, Robert confirmed. Captain Santos. I trust there will be no further delays. None whatsoever, Santos said. We'll begin boarding immediately. Mitchell and Walsh both responded quickly. Yes, sir. Good, Robert said. Maya, Zara, have a wonderful flight. Text me when you land. We will, Dad. Love you. Love you too. And I'm proud of how you handled this. The call ended, but the echo remained. Gate 42 was silent, still trying to process what had just happened. The viewer count on the live stream was now over 203,000. The hashtags trending internationally. News outlets had begun calling the airline's corporate offices. Mitchell turned to the twins, her voice a whisper. "Your boarding passes, please." Maya and Zara handed them over, calm, composed. "Welcome to Flight 447. Mitchell said, eyes lowered. "We're honored to have you aboard." The girls walked through the jet bridge, heads high heels clicking like punctuation marks on a statement the world wasn't ready for. Behind them, the terminal buzzed with what it had witnessed. In the window of the corporate jet, Robert Thompson raised a hand in a small, proud wave. His daughters waved back, and somewhere between glass and steel, the message became clear. Respect isn't about status. It's about truth, dignity, and the quiet strength to stand your ground. The jet bridge echoed with their footsteps, measured, confident, unwavering. As Maya and Zara stepped onto the aircraft, first-class passengers turned their heads. Some recognized them from the live stream. Others had simply witnessed the commotion from their seats. But no one said a word. There was only a quiet acknowledgement in the eyes of those who'd watched it all unfold. They took their seats, 1A and 1B, perfectly purchased, rightfully theirs. Outside, the final passengers were still boarding, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through the Gate 42. But in the quiet of first class, the twins finally exhaled. Not because the battle was over, but because they'd won the right to fight it on their terms. From the window, Maya caught sight of her father's jet, still parked on the tarmac, its engines humming with restrained power. She knew Robert Thompson wasn't going anywhere until he was certain they were in the air. And that knowledge gave her peace. She glanced over at her sister. "We did it," she whispered. Zara gave a small nod. "Yeah, but now the real work begins." 30 days later, the ripple effect was undeniable. The airline industry hadn't just been rattled, it had been reformed. Gate agent Karen Mitchell now sat in a sterile conference room at LAX, surrounded by a group of colleagues undergoing mandatory bias training. The initiative had been developed by Thomson Holdings' Diversity Division, and it was unlike anything the staff had expected. Gone were the bland videos and outdated pamphlets. In their place were real stories, live testimonies, interactive case studies. Employees watched recordings of real incidents, some covert, some blatant, all based on true passenger experiences. And they were forced to reflect, to analyze, to sit with their discomfort. At the front of the room, the trainer paused a video. "Miss Mitchell," he said, turning to her, "can you tell us what you learned from the Gate 42 incident?" Karen hesitated, hands clenched in her lap. "I learned," she began slowly, "that I made assumptions. I looked at two black teenagers and assumed they couldn't possibly belong in first class. I treated their success like it was suspicious, like it needed to be explained. And how did those assumptions affect your behavior? I questioned them. I humiliated them. I called security. I treated them as threats instead of as guests." The trainer nodded. "What would you do differently today?" "I would start by treating every passenger equally. I would ask questions without judgment. I would remember that bias isn't just about hate, it's about habit. And habits can be changed." Across the country, similar training sessions were happening in waves. The airline had rolled out the passenger dignity protocol across all 847 airports in its network. The internal memo announcing the change was clear. All staff are required to complete a 40-hour training course focused on implicit bias, racial equity, and ethical passenger engagement. Failure to complete the course will result in suspension from customer-facing roles. Customer service representatives learned to question their assumptions. Supervisors learned how to de-escalate rather than intimidate. Even flight attendants received specialized training on handling disputes without bias. Brad Chen, the nervous supervisor who'd once stood silently behind Mitchell, had been reassigned. He now worked in cargo operations far from passengers for the foreseeable future Before he could return to any customer-facing role, he'd been ordered to complete 80 hours of sensitivity training. A sticky note had been placed on his monitor. Every passenger deserves dignity. Jennifer Walsh, meanwhile, had released a public apology on video. It was viewed over 2.3 million times in its first week. In it, she addressed Maya and Zara directly. "I failed as a leader. I allowed discrimination to occur under my supervision. I prioritized corporate convenience over human dignity. I am committed to ensuring this never happens again, not under my watch and not under this company's name." But it wasn't just about apologies. It was about systems. Technology had stepped in too. The airline's booking platform was now equipped with a new tool called Bias Check, an AI-based alert that flagged patterns of unnecessary ticket challenges. If a staff member repeatedly questioned young travelers, passengers of color, or customers outside traditional expectations, the system issued a warning. Repeat offenders were automatically enrolled in retraining sessions. Another innovation called Dignity Check let passengers rate their experience in real time via mobile app. The data was collected and reviewed monthly by independent auditors. Any discriminatory trends were flagged immediately and addressed with both coaching and accountability. "Passengers now have more power than ever," said one executive, "not just to rate snacks or legroom, but to demand respect." Positive reinforcement was also built in. Customer service reps who received consistently high dignity scores were publicly recognized and given quarterly bonuses. It was a full-scale culture shift. Hiring practices were updated too. New employees were required to undergo diversity training before their first day. Existing staff had to pass a new compliance certification, which included case-based assessments modeled after the Gate 42 incident. Maya and Zara weren't just symbols anymore. They were change agents. Both had accepted offers from the airline to serve as youth inclusion ambassadors. Their roles included speaking at conferences, participating in executive training sessions, and helping design curriculum for the next wave of equity-focused reform. At a corporate summit for airline leadership, Maya stood on stage before 500 executives. "We didn't want revenge," she told the room. "We wanted education. We wanted change. Not just for us, but for everyone who looks like us and for everyone who gets judged before they speak." The applause lasted 2 minutes. Zara took the mic after. "We created the Dignity and Travel Scholarship Fund," she announced. "It's designed to give underrepresented youth the chance to see the world and to be treated with respect while doing it." The program's first year funded 247 trips for young travelers, most of them first-time flyers. Many came from inner-city schools, rural areas, and underserved communities. Their journeys included college visits, cultural exchanges, and leadership retreats. Travel expands identity. Zara told one group of students, "It teaches you that you belong everywhere." Meanwhile, the airline stock, which had briefly dipped after the incident, bounced back and then climbed. Investors realized what leadership had missed. Inclusion wasn't just a moral issue, it was a business one. Customer satisfaction among passengers of color rose 12% in just 2 months. Young traveler ratings climbed even higher. The airline's social media team, once defensive, now leaned into the message. Their pinned post read, "Respect isn't reserved. It's guaranteed." Dignity takes flight. The impact rippled far beyond this one company. Other airlines quietly took notes. Some launched their own versions of the Dignity Protocol. Others reached out to Thomson Holdings directly for consultation. Airports began reviewing their own internal policies. Even hotels, restaurants, and transportation services followed suit. The Thomson Standard, as it came to be known in the industry, became shorthand for bias-free service. And the world began to change, not all at once, but enough to notice. Within weeks, federal agencies took notice. The U.S. Department of Transportation released a formal statement referencing the Gate 42 incident, stating that the discrimination experienced by Maya and Zara Thompson highlights the urgent need for national standards in equitable passenger treatment. They weren't alone. Civil rights groups, travel unions, and political leaders quickly aligned around the momentum. Hearings were scheduled. Committees were formed. A nationwide review of airline passenger complaints was ordered. By the time Maya stood before a congressional subcommittee, she wasn't just a teenager with a viral video. She was a symbol, a voice, and she carried herself like it. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer and standing behind a polished wood podium, Maya looked every bit the civil rights advocate she had become. "I'm not here because I wanted to be," she began, voice steady. "I'm here because I had to be. My sister and I didn't plan on starting a movement. We just wanted to board a plane." The room was quiet. No interruptions, no questions, just silence as she continued. "What happened to us wasn't unique," she said. "It was just the first time someone filmed it, and the world was watching. We were treated like suspects, not because of anything we did, but because of who we are and what we look like." Behind her sat Zara, nodding slowly. Their father, Robert Thompson, watched from the gallery, arms folded, expression proud but resolute. Maya finished her statement with a final, undeniable truth. "We don't need sympathy. We need systems, policies, accountability. We don't want to punish. We want to prevent." Across the country, her words were broadcast on news outlets, shared on social media, and quoted in op-eds, and change followed. Zara took a different path. While Maya leaned into law and civil rights, Zara founded a consulting firm, ClearPath Equity Advisors, designed to help corporations identify and eliminate internal bias. Their clients included airlines, hotel chains, ride-sharing platforms, and even corporate law firms. In her first keynote address at a Fortune 500 leadership summit, Zara didn't mince words. "Discrimination is expensive," she said, "not just morally, but financially. In the age of smartphones and social media, every customer interaction is a potential headline. Either your company protects dignity or it gambles with its reputation." She paused, letting that sink in. "Ask yourself," she continued, "do you want to be the next Gate 42? That question became a litmus test in boardrooms across America. Companies began revising their diversity and inclusion protocols, not just for optics, but for survival. Meanwhile, the Dignity in Travel Scholarship Fund grew rapidly. What had started as a single program became a global initiative, partnering with educational nonprofits. Thompson Holdings funded international student trips, cultural exchanges, and immersive leadership camps. Within a year, over 200 students from underrepresented communities had flown on fully funded journeys, many experiencing their first trip outside their hometowns. One student, an 11th grader from Detroit, wrote in her thank you letter, "I never thought I'd see another country. Now, I want to become an international lawyer. Because of you, I believe I can." Zara smiled when she read that one. She kept it framed in her office. Meanwhile, industry numbers told the rest of the story. Airline discrimination complaints dropped 34% within 18 months. Customer satisfaction among passengers of color rose 28%. The Thompson Standard was adopted by 7 of the top 10 airlines in the U.S. News outlets labeled it a quiet revolution in corporate ethics. And at the center of it all were 2 teenagers who had simply refused to step aside. Sarah Kim, the blogger who first live-streamed the incident, wrote a book about the aftermath. Titled Terminal Justice: How 2 Girls Changed the Skies. It became an unexpected bestseller. In it, she wrote, "Maya and Zara didn't yell. They didn't riot. They didn't beg. They calmly stood their ground, revealed their truth, and let the world decide. And the world did." She was invited to speak at universities' news panels and corporate trainings. Her camera, once pointed at injustice, had become a tool for systemic awareness. The airline that had nearly lost everything became a case study in redemption. Under public scrutiny and shareholder pressure, it doubled down on reform. CEO statements went from reactive to proactive. Annual reports now included diversity performance metrics. A new executive position was created. Chief Inclusion Officer reporting directly to the board. Every quarter, progress reports were released publicly, and they didn't sugarcoat the data. Real change means real transparency. One press release said, "We're not perfect, but we're committed." The ripple effect didn't stop at the airport. Hotels began offering implicit bias training for front desk staff. Luxury retailers reevaluated how they treated young customers of color. Tech companies revised hiring practices to detect and interrupt unconscious bias in screening algorithms. Restaurants adopted equal service protocols during peak hours. Even museums began to include stories like Maya and Zara's in exhibits on modern civil rights. In classrooms, high school debate teams cited the incident in arguments about digital activism and social justice. Business schools added the case to their ethics curriculum. Gate 42 became a shorthand for any moment when someone is judged unfairly based not on action but assumption. And it became a battle cry for standing tall anyway. Back at Thompson Holdings, Robert Thompson watched it all unfold with the pride of a father and the clarity of a CEO. In an interview with Harvard Business Review, he reflected on what had happened. My daughters didn't just face discrimination. They exposed a system that allowed it to happen. And then they offered a blueprint to fix it, not through rage, but through resolve. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. If you have power and you don't use it to protect others, then what's the point of having it? That quote went viral. It ended up on posters in college dorms, on t-shirts at protests, and as a banner in a high school civics class. The story of Gate 42 had become more than a moment. It was now a movement, a message, a mirror held up to every company, every leader, every system. Respect isn't optional. It's the minimum. And if you fail to give it, don't be surprised when the world demands it anyway. 3 years after the events at Gate 42, the world still remembered. Not because Maya and Zara kept reminding it, but because their story had embedded itself into the collective memory of modern justice. Their calm refusal to be erased had changed more than airline policy. It had shifted culture. By now, Maya Thompson was in her 3rd year of law school specializing in civil rights litigation. Her classmates knew her story. Professors quoted her congressional testimony. Even her textbooks contained excerpts of her words. During a panel at Columbia University, she sat beside federal judges and legal scholars, dissecting the role of social media in shaping civil liberties. The law reacts, she said, but live streaming documentation forces it to respond. Our phones have become our first line of defense and our last line of truth. A student asked her afterward if she ever felt bitter about what happened. Bitter, Maya smiled. No. Determined every day. Zara, meanwhile, had expanded her consulting firm ClearPath Equity Advisors into a global brand. She partnered with multinational corporations, guiding them through internal equity audits and compliance overhauls. Her clients included everything from airlines to fashion brands to universities. She created a proprietary tool, the Bias Mirror, a diagnostic software that tracked decision-making trends within companies to uncover implicit discrimination. In the boardrooms of power, Zara's presence was unexpected. Young, black, female, and completely unbothered by anyone's surprise. She often started presentations with this line, "I'm not here to accuse you of racism. I'm here to show you the cost of unchecked bias and how much more you stand to gain when you fix it." Her company became so successful, it began turning down clients who weren't willing to make real changes. This isn't PR rehab, Zara would say. It's structural integrity work. If you're just looking for a hashtag, we're not the team for you. Together, the twins had shifted the conversation from reaction to responsibility. Their father, Robert Thompson, now served as a strategic advisor for the Department of Transportation, helping to draft federal anti-discrimination guidelines based on the Thompson Standard. The policies were modeled after the reforms their airline had implemented post-Gate 42. One of those reforms, the Passenger Dignity Index. Every airline was now required to report quarterly metrics on passenger complaints, discrimination claims, and equity training compliance. Airlines that failed to meet minimum standards faced fines and public listing on the department's Watch Report, a transparency dashboard that ranked carriers by ethical customer treatment. Transparency isn't punishment, Robert explained in a press conference. It's accountability. It forces companies to either fix their behavior or lose the trust of their customers. And it worked. Passenger complaints dropped 40% across the board. Instances of on-site removals were cut in half. Airline staff retention even improved as employees felt safer and more supported in treating passengers fairly. But the real impact wasn't in the numbers, it was in the mindset. The incident at Gate 42 had become a case study, not just in business schools, but in humanity. Middle schoolers wrote essays about Maya and Zara for Black History Month. Nonprofits used their story as a launch pad for youth-led equity campaigns. Even Saturday morning cartoons began including episodes about fairness in travel and standing up for what's right. A children's book titled First Class Sisters, based loosely on their story, topped the New York Times bestsellers list for 14 long weeks. It was illustrated with vibrant colors showing two young black girls navigating a confusing airport, holding hands, facing the world head-on. The dedication read, "To the quiet resistors, the ones who stand tall, even when the world tries to sit them down." Maya and Zara visited schools regularly, reading the book to students. During one visit, a little girl asked, "Were you scared?" Zara smiled and knelt beside her. "Honestly, a little," she admitted, "but we were more focused than afraid. We had each other, and we had the truth." Their poise had never been about perfection. It had always been about purpose, and that purpose only grew. Maya eventually launched a nonprofit Justice Ready, a legal education initiative for high school students. Its mission was to prepare the next generation of civil rights advocates before they even stepped into college. The first cohort included 150 students from 12 cities. They studied historical civil rights cases, practiced mock trials, and learned how to advocate for themselves in everyday life. "I don't want to be the exception," Maya told them. "I want you all to be the new rule." Zara's consulting firm began offering a reverse audit, a voluntary process where companies allowed themselves to be examined by real customers from underrepresented backgrounds. "We don't give them scripts," Zara explained in a Forbes interview. "We give them a seat at the table and we listen." One hotel chain discovered it had inadvertently been placing minority guests in less desirable rooms due to an outdated risk algorithm. Another discovered their call center agents were unconsciously upselling only to customers with standard American accents. Data doesn't lie, and neither did Maya and Zara. Back at their old airline, Karen Mitchell's journey had also evolved. After completing over 100 hours of training and participating in a public reconciliation event, she had voluntarily stepped into a new role, diversity training specialist. Her presentations opened the same way every time. "My name is Karen Mitchell. I was the gate agent at Gate 42. And I was wrong." Instead of excuses, she offered transparency. Instead of defense, she offered growth. "I assumed," she would say. "I profiled. I failed to see two intelligent, accomplished young women standing in front of me. But they gave me something rare, an opportunity to do better." Her story became a reminder that the goal wasn't punishment. It was progress. And for those willing to do the work, redemption was possible. Even Officer Rodriguez, the security guard who had first approached the twins, was promoted. Not because he was perfect, but because he had shown restraint and integrity in a moment that could have escalated. He now trained other security teams on de-escalation and unbiased engagement. At the end of his sessions, he often quoted something Robert Thompson had once said: "Power isn't always the ability to act. Sometimes it's the discipline not to." Gate 42 was no longer just a terminal. It had become a monument, an accidental memorial to what happens when injustice is met with grace and silence is replaced with strategy. Airports across the country began installing placards titled "The Dignity Pledge," displaying commitments to fair treatment, open accountability, and the basic belief that all people, no matter what they look like, deserve to board with dignity. The placard at LAX's Gate 42 included a quote from Maya and Zara's original live stream: "We paid for these seats. We earned our place, and we're not moving." Years later, travelers passing through LAX would pause at Gate 42 and glance up at the small polished plaque mounted discreetly by the boarding area. The Dignity Pledge. This gate stands in recognition of passengers Maya and Zara Thompson, who in 2025 reminded the world that dignity is not optional. May every traveler be treated with fairness, respect, and the assumption that they belong. Beneath the inscription was a single simple line: "We earned our place, and we're not moving." It had become more than a quote. It was a promise, and every major airline knew it. Other airports followed suit: JFK O'Hare, Atlanta, Hartsfield. They all installed similar placards in high-traffic terminals. Even international airports like Heathrow and Incheon began implementing versions of the passenger dignity protocol. It became the new global standard. Treat every passenger as if their seat is earned, because it is. The effects trickled deep into the airline industry's core. New employee handbooks included the Gate 42 incident in their onboarding materials. Virtual reality training modules walked recruits through simulated bias scenarios, some of them based directly on the twins' experience. In those scenarios, the question was always the same: what would you do differently? And most employees now had the right answer. But this movement didn't just change how companies trained staff. It changed how passengers saw themselves. Teenagers of color began to travel more confidently, knowing they had rights and knowing the world was watching. Families started having open conversations about how to respond to discrimination in public. People who had once been told to just ignore it now had a framework for standing their ground gracefully, legally, and strategically. On TikTok, the hashtag #Gate42 moment became a trend where users posted stories of quiet resistance, whether it was standing up to profiling, speaking out when someone was mistreated, or simply refusing to back down when they knew they were in the right. One video went viral when a Latina mother calmly corrected a hotel clerk who had downgraded her reservation accidentally. The mother cited the Thompson standard, asked for the manager, and received a full refund and a suite upgrade. The top comment read, "Zara would be proud." Even companies outside the travel industry took notice. Streaming platforms created documentaries on corporate accountability. High-end fashion brands revamped their in-store customer service training. Major banks revised their ID verification procedures after multiple complaints that clients of color were being treated differently. All roads led back to that single moment in Terminal C, a moment that was no longer just about two girls. It had become a movement about everyone who had ever been underestimated. Maya now, a practicing civil rights attorney, had argued 3 major discrimination cases by age 26. One involved a restaurant chain. Another involved a retail giant. The third, a class action lawsuit against a rideshare company, ended in a $64 million settlement and a national apology campaign. "I don't fight because I enjoy conflict," she said during a televised interview. "I fight because the systems don't fix themselves. They only change when we make them uncomfortable enough to evolve." Zara, in parallel, launched a fellowship program for young equity strategists. Each year, 30 fellows were selected from around the world to work on real corporate cases, helping identify bias patterns and recommend actionable reforms. Her office walls were covered in postcards and letters from her fellows. One stood out. It was scribbled in purple ink and taped to her desk. Dear Zara, I used to think I had to shrink myself to be taken seriously. But now, I show up exactly as I am thanks to you. Their father, Robert, was still flying, still consulting, and still refusing to let power go to waste. At the National Inclusion Summit, he delivered a keynote address titled Privilege as Responsibility. You can inherit power, he told the room. You can acquire power. But the moment you witness injustice and do nothing, you become part of the problem. He paused and looked out across a crowd of CEOs, policymakers, educators, and activists. Power should never be silent. His speech received a standing ovation, and not just because of his words, but because of what the world had seen him do. He hadn't protected his daughters by shielding them. He had empowered them to defend themselves and supported them when they chose to do it publicly with grace and strategy. That choice had reshaped corporate America. In a televised interview on 60 Minutes, the twins were asked how their lives had changed since that day at the airport. We used to think we were passengers, Maya said. But now, Zara added, we realize we're also the pilots. The interviewer laughed, surprised by their ease. And that was the most powerful part of it all. They didn't just endure what happened, they redefined it. They didn't just survive the scrutiny, they commanded it. And they never once apologized for expecting what they were owed equal treatment. Back at LAX near Gate 42, a new generation of travelers passed through each day. Many never stopped to read the plaque. Others did, and snapped pictures or whispered the story to someone beside them. Sometimes, parents would point it out to their kids. Those girls stood right here, they'd say. And because of them, people get treated better now. Sometimes the kids would shrug. Sometimes they'd nod. But the world had changed anyway. Because it only takes one moment, one line in the sand, one decision to say, not today, not to us, not like this. And that moment at Gate 42 had echoed louder than anyone could have imagined. It had outgrown the terminal, outgrown the live stream, outgrown the discrimination itself. It had become legacy, not carved into stone, but etched in the way passengers now carried themselves, and how staff greeted them, and how the entire travel industry looked inward and asked, are we doing better today than we did yesterday? And thanks to Maya and Zara Thompson, the answer was finally, steadily becoming yes. In the years that followed, Gate 42 came to symbolize something much greater than the original incident. It wasn't just about an airport anymore. It was about how we treat each other when no one is watching, about what happens when assumptions go unchecked, and what can happen when someone has the courage and the clarity to say, this isn't right. The Thompson twins' story had sparked something irreversible, a generational recalibration of what fairness looked like, especially in places where power had traditionally been invisible behind counters and uniforms or embedded in policy. And perhaps most importantly, their story had changed the stories we told ourselves about who belonged where. In one of the many ripple effects of the Gate 42 movement, college campuses began hosting annual Belonging Week events inspired by Maya and Zara. These weeks featured open forums, student-led policy reviews, and workshops on bias awareness. Some schools even had mock boarding simulations to challenge students' assumptions about status and worth. One campus set up a recreation of Gate 42 inside the Student Center. Visitors took turns role-playing the scene from different perspectives: passenger gate agent, bystander, security officer. One student wrote on the reflection wall afterward, I realized I've been silent in moments when I should have spoken. I won't be silent again. Meanwhile, art museums began to showcase digital installations of the incident. One titled Clear for Takeoff featured side-by-side live stream footage with interactive commentary from diversity scholars. Visitors could pause, zoom in, and examine every moment how the crowd responded, how the officials behaved, how Maya and Zara held their composure. A pop-up gallery in New York displayed hundreds of viewer comments from the original live stream, projected in real time across the walls like a digital waterfall. Visitors could scroll through them, watching the tide of public opinion shift from confusion to outrage to admiration. On one wall was Zara's line from that pivotal moment. Actually, this incident is just beginning, and that more than anything proved to be true. Airlines across the globe didn't just adopt the dignity protocol. They began to measure success differently. They started evaluating their performance not just by on-time departures or baggage claims, but by how passengers felt when they left. Were they respected? Were they seen? Were they treated as people first and profiles never? Customer satisfaction surveys were redesigned to include fairness indicators. Executives were given performance bonuses, not just for profitability, but for equity scores. The term Passenger Equity Index was coined and standardized by international travel boards. Maya, now a partner at a leading civil rights law firm, helped draft global airline accountability guidelines through the International Aviation Consortium. Her focus wasn't just litigation, it was prevention. Laws can punish, she often said, but only culture can protect. Her work took her from Geneva to Johannesburg, from courtrooms to conferences. Yet she always carried one photo in her wallet the moment she and Zara boarded Flight 447. Heads held high, surrounded by passengers who had tried to make them small. Zara, expanding her firm, began mentoring other young women, especially black and brown girls, on how to navigate boardrooms without shrinking themselves. Her viral TED Talk, Boarding Passes and Bias, Why We Must Redesign Power, amassed over 10 million views. She ended it with the privilege is when you get on the plane and no one questions you. Power is when you make sure no one else is questioned either. Their impact reached the White House when a National Youth Equity Council was formed. Maya and Zara were both appointed as honorary advisors. Their role, to ensure federal agencies included youth voices in future equity initiatives. Even Hollywood took notice. A limited series titled Gate 42 was released by a major streaming platform. It wasn't a dramatization. It was a docu-narrative using real footage interviews and reenactments to tell the story in its full emotional depth. The final scene featured a quiet reenactment, the two girls standing still, tickets in hand, as the crowd swirled around them, assumptions crashing like waves. But they didn't move, and they didn't bend. Instead, they waited until the system blinked first. Critics praised the series as a blueprint for modern activism and a reminder that civility is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. High schools assigned it as required viewing in history and ethics classes. Flight schools used it as a case study in customer interaction courses. And parents, thousands of them, used it as a conversation starter with their children. What would you have done at that gate? Would you have spoken up? Would you have pulled out your phone? Would you have looked away? These weren't hypothetical questions anymore. They were the new curriculum of courage. One afternoon, 5 years after the incident, Maya and Zara returned to LAX for a speaking event. They hadn't been back to Gate 42 since. The terminal looked the same: bright lights, moving walkways, the familiar scent of jet fuel, and overpriced coffee. But something felt different: the energy, the posture of the employees, the presence of that plaque. A gate agent spotted them and immediately stood straighter. "Ms. Thompson?" "Ms. Thompson," he said. It's an honor." They smiled and nodded, keeping things simple. They didn't need ceremony, just acknowledgement. As they approached the gate, a group of high school students on a field trip recognized them. One girl nervously asked, "Can I take a picture with you?" "Of course," Maya said. The girl's voice cracked as she spoke. "Because of you, I want to go into law. And because of you," she looked at Zara, "I know I don't have to apologize for taking up space." Zara nodded. "Take up all the space," she said, "and then make more for someone else." They stood for the photo-smiling arms around the next generation. A nearby passenger watching from a distance whispered to her husband, "That's them, the girls from the airport thing." But her husband corrected her quietly. "No," he said, "that's the women who changed everything." Later that evening, as their return flight soared above the clouds, Maya and Zara sat side by side in first class, just as they had that day. The sky outside their window stretched wide and golden, fading into twilight. Zara glanced at her sister, then leaned her head back against the seat. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. All the time, Maya said, not missing a beat. They both knew how easily it could have gone another way. If they hadn't stayed calm, if they hadn't gone live, if their father hadn't answered, if a camera hadn't been rolling, if they'd just walked away quietly like so many others had been forced to. But they hadn't. They had stood their ground, not with shouting or anger, but with composure, evidence, and conviction. And the world had listened, not perfectly, not all at once, but enough to matter, enough to move. Maya pulled a notebook from her bag. She was reviewing her latest draft, an article she'd been asked to write for the American Bar Association journal titled Policy by Livestream. How one moment redefined public accountability. It was part legal breakdown, part personal essay. In it, she wrote, "Gate 42 didn't change the world because it went viral. It changed the world because it was real. Because we stayed visible long enough to force the truth into the frame. Because we didn't flinch. And because people were finally ready to see what had always been there." Zara looked over her shoulder. "That part's good," she said. "You should end with that." "I was going to," Maya replied. "But then I remembered what Dad always said." "Which part?" "That power means nothing if it doesn't protect someone else." Zara smiled and turned back to the window. Below them, cities lit up like constellations on the earth, each one filled with people who might someday face their own Gate 42 moment. Back on the ground, the legacy continued. The dignity in travel scholarship had expanded into a global foundation. With chapters on 5 continents, it now served over 5,000 students annually, covering not just airfare, but passports, mentors, and immersive cultural education. Zara often said, travel shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a portal. Students from refugee camps flew for the first time. Teens from rural towns crossed oceans to attend Model UN. Young leaders from indigenous communities shared their cultures in global summits, and every one of them boarded with confidence, because someone had made space for them, because someone had proven it could be done. Maya's nonprofit Justice Ready was now integrated into dozens of high school civics programs. They had created free open source curriculum on topics ranging from civil rights to youth advocacy to systemic change. One of their modules included an assignment titled Design Your Gate 42 Response. Students watched footage from the incident and were asked to answer, what would you have done as a passenger? What would you have done as the gate agent? What do you do when you see power being misused? How do you use your own power? Some schools held live debates. Others turned it into student-led awareness campaigns. One principal wrote to Maya, "I've never seen my students this engaged with justice before." You didn't just inspire them. You gave them tools. As the years passed, people still told the story. It changed in the retelling, streamlined, dramatized, misquoted, but the essence remained. 2 teenage girls, a boarding pass, a line they wouldn't cross, and a world that had to catch up to them. Maya and Zara never needed to repeat the story themselves. Others did it for them because it reminded people of what dignity looked like, not in theory, but in action. One spring, LAX unveiled a new wing in Terminal C, a modern extension featuring art gardens and interactive history walls dedicated to voices of change. At the heart of it stood a bronze statue, life-sized, quietly elegant. It depicted two young women, standing shoulder to shoulder, holding boarding passes in one hand and each other's hand in the other. No anger in their faces, just resolve. At their feet, engraved in metal, were the names Maya Thompson, Zara Thompson. And beneath that, we paid for these seats. We earned our place. We're not moving. On the day of the unveiling, Maya and Zara stood quietly in front of the statue as the crowd gathered behind them. News cameras, community leaders, student groups, and employees from every level of the airport were present. Karen Mitchell was there too. She wore a pin that read Equity Advocate and had brought a group of new gate agents with her. As Maya stepped up to speak, the audience quieted. She looked over the crowd, not as someone who demanded attention, but as someone who had already earned it. "We never wanted to be famous," she began. "We wanted to be treated fairly." She turned to face the statue. "But if our story has helped even one person stand taller, speak louder, or board with pride, then it was worth every moment." Zara stepped up beside her. "We didn't build this," she said, gesturing to the statue. "You did. All of you who told the story, who demanded change, who didn't let this fade away." They smiled, and they walked off the stage together, shoulder to shoulder, as always. Because their journey had never been about a gate. It had been about every gate that came after. Every moment someone was asked to prove they belonged. And every time they chose to say, "I already do."